With the new renders done, I'm going to switch back into the compositing layout, and I can go in and refresh the passes. So when I look at the sky pass, I don't need to refresh that one, but on the cloud pass, I can reload the image, and that should do it. If not, I'll just jump in. I'll get the second picture here. I think that might be it. There we go. So with all of our images now, we can begin to recomposite. I need to do a few color touch-ups though. I'm really trying to get more of a kind of a foggy, kind of cloudy, hazy snowfield, and this directional light source here is far too much for what we need. So let's start off by doing a little bit of color correction on the ground pass. I'm going to look through my list of available operators and choose a color adjust. And I'm probably going to do a little bit of work just managing the hue saturation value and maybe even a little color correcting as well. So I'll middle click and drop both of those into my graph and connect the output of the tree to the input of the HSV, and I'll start to work with some of these basics now. So if I go in and I start working with the saturation of the layers, of this element here, I can go in and start to really reduce the contrast so I get less directional lighting, and I get a much colder, frostier sort of look right away just by dropping a little bit of saturation in the highs and kind of keeping the lows on a less steep ramp. So again, if we go this way, we're starting to increase saturation on our highs. But as we drag our values down here, we're kind of clamping them. It's like rescaling almost. Alright, I kind of like that. That works for me. So now I'll go in and I'll composite the sky pass in as well. So the sky is probably going to need some color correcting as well. We could even use the HSV again. I could do a copy paste and reuse that. Again, the HSV doesn't accept more than one input, so we just have to use two inputs, two separate streams. And again, if I view the result of the copied values from this HSV, you can see it actually does a pretty decent job, and by the time our clouds go over top of this, we should be able to get a pretty dark looking scene. So I'm going to take the sky and composite it with the ground and tree. Let's put this as our background and use, I guess an overnode would work because we have the alpha channel. If I look at the HSV result, and yeah, we have a good alpha channel here. So I'll turn off the alpha channel and I'll use an overnode. We'll go to the composite series of nodes, choose an over, and use this as my background, the trees as my foreground, and so I've got kind of a cold look like so. I could even go into the HSV here and maybe even clamp the highs just a little bit more, just bring them down a little bit more across. Oops, this is for the right one. This is for the wrong one here. And then for the sky. Okay, there we go. So I'm editing the wrong one. Let me just bring those highs down a little bit more. Clamp that, clamp that. Let's go into this one. Let's edit, and let's work on the saturation graphs here. And here we can even bring those down a little bit more as well. Don't want too much blue in there, but just a little bit would be nice. I can just see a little bit of blue in this ground plane here. So I'll be using the clouds as my last layer. So I'll now bring in the snow, and the snow I can again use a simple over. Take the result of the background and foreground images and composite them using the foreground images alpha channel. So we're starting to get the snow falling the way we want. And finally, we need to do a little bit of blur on the snow level before moving to our cloud level. So we'll bring in a bit of a filter. We'll use a Gaussian blur. I'll just drop that into the graph. Output the snow into the blur and the blur into the foreground of the over, and we start to get our blurred snow, which is start to look pretty nice. We don't need to use too large of a blur width or height. Again, I'm just going to drag and drop width onto height to create an expression relationship. And what's kind of neat is you can actually reuse the snowpass layer and take a more blurred version of it and comp it back in again, and you can start to get some pretty neat movement through the scene, movement through the frames. So you'll see here I can actually get some kind of blurred motion. Again, I'm past frame 300, so let me just reduce the timeline. There we go. And you can start to see how that might look and create sort of a misty movement through the scene. In any event, I'm going to go back to about 1.5, maybe 2, and I'm going to composite the clouds over top of everything else. So again, I can just go ahead with an over because I have an alpha channel that works for me. So I'll use another over node. Background, foreground with alpha channel. So now I get that. So now I can really start to balance the image. I can bring down the blues in the background image a little more. So I'll go over to my sky pass, the HSV adjust layer. Really desaturate these values on the ground tree pass. There's still a lot of blue in there. So if I can pull that down a little bit. And then I'm going to try and composite a blurred copy of the snow over everything as well, just to add a little bit more haze to the environment. So I'll take another Gaussian blur, I'll copy and paste that. I'll edit this blur to have some value, say like 35, really high blur value. We can view this. So we don't have anything here. Let's see, what do I have? Snow, blurred too much gives me nothing. I do get a little bit of movement through the frame. Maybe that's a little too much. Even something like that would work. That'll kind of soften the snow a little more. So we'll take this and we'll composite it in as well. I could composite it behind this cloud pass, so I can just copy and paste an over, and I'll just intercept this over here. So hang on, let me just do this properly here. So I've got my snow pass blurred to give me this. I've got another blur to combine the result of my first blur and this new second blur, so I get that. It's a little bit of a glow to them. It's kind of nice. Maybe I can pump this up a little bit more. And then we'll layer in the clouds. So I'll take the result of the blurred snow, twice blurred snow, and use the clouds foreground pass over. This might even be a little bright as well, so we could even color correct it. So color adjust, maybe do a, in this case, we're really focusing on saturations and values here to get the effect. So using our saturation graphs. And maybe even doing a little bit of, maybe even an intensity. This snow is really bright here and really blue. So just find any way to clamp out all those blues there. And maybe even doing a slight blur on the entire image itself. And recombining it with the original. Maybe we could screen it over top, so I could use a math composite. Recombine it with a blurred version of the scene, so we get a totally blown out version, and then kind of blend it back in to act as sort of like an additive mask. Or if you're trying to do a darkening sort of effect, but leave it on a screen. And I'll finally output this. And get a final render done. So I'll render this now, and that'll take care of the scene. We'll look at the final result in just a moment.